With limited government, I thought we had two pretty good definitions. This first one says a government with restrictions. That's the basic part of it. A limited government's going to have restrictions on power. The people get the individuals get rights. That's part of it being limited, is the government has to protect your rights. And I thought this second definition did a good job too. It says that it also, the way it limits your power, the way it has restrictions, is with separation of powers and checks and balances, which are two more of our definitions coming up. So there's the definition of limited government. An example, I thought this one was sweet and simple. Any democratic government is a limited government, we had said. So the United States, any of the governments of the world where leaders can't just do whatever they want, where the people have protections and rights, are going to be examples of limited governments. The picture that you could have drawn, I thought this was a pretty good picture. It shows more power on the left-hand side over here. And if this leader here wants more power, he or she simply just cannot cross that line to more power. They can't do it. The people are keeping them back. There are limits on their power. So that's limited government. And then here is the pantomime. It says here, representative government is where citizens have a say or vote in what happens in their government. But the part I really liked here is the second line. It says, the government rules with the consent of the governed, which we've talked about before. The people choose their leaders and they rule because we allow it. The second definition here, I liked that it said the government elects leaders and they use the majority's voice to make decisions that benefit all of society, which is how our government works. When you move over to the example, it uses our state today as the example. It says we elect members to Congress from Missouri and they represent us then at the federal level. So we choose representatives to go to Washington, D.C. and make life better for all of the people in Missouri. The picture here that one of your classmates drew shows a representative government very good. It shows the people down here voting. We choose an elected representative, and then they go to Washington, D.C. or Jeff City and make laws and rules for us. This would be a good example here of a republic as well. And then here is the pantomime. This semester is checks and balances. I thought there were a couple good definitions here. This one here hits on the idea that these separate branches are supposed to prevent actions by other branches. Checks and balances is just one branch stopping another branch from doing something that gives them too much power. The next definition here with checks and balances said these two different groups have to agree. Maybe not always agree, but they can't disagree. If one group doesn't like what the other group's doing, it's probably going to end up getting checked and stopped. And the third one here, the definition, is what it does is it balances the power of government equally and fairly. It makes sure that no one group has too much power. An example here, there are many different types of checks and balances. One of those that we see most often is a president vetoing a bill or Congress overriding that president's veto. Those are both examples of checks and balances. The president could veto Congress if he thinks their bill is bad and they're trying to get too much power and pass a bad bill. Congress, on the other hand, could override his veto if they think that his reason for stopping their bill is a bad one. And the picture here that somebody in class drew just shows a scale, and here you have one side of government balanced out by the other side of government. It's all a balancing act. Make sure no one has too much power, their power is too heavy. And then here's the pantomime that we came up with. All right, our next definition of separation of powers, it goes with checks and balances, usually when we're talking about limited government in our country. Separation of powers, there were two definitions here that I thought hit on some good stuff. Separation of powers, it says here, is the separation between groups. No one group has total power. They both have power over something. The key thing here with separation of powers is every part of our government has control over something, but not control over everything. That way they all have a different job, but nobody can control everything. The next definition kind of gets into that as well. Having different branches of government, so all the power is spread out and no one person or group controls everything. They each control a part of our government, but not the whole thing, so no one can become a dictator. That's separation of powers. An example here, usually when you think of separation of powers, you just think of our three branches of government. This page here says we have a legislative, executive, and judicial branch to make sure that none of those groups can ever take control of the entire government. A great way to see this is what just went down last week. The president wanted the vice president to say that he won the Electoral College, but the vice president isn't allowed to do that because Congress does that by counting the electoral votes. Congress doesn't just get to decide who they want to be the president because the vice president is the one that actually makes the declaration of who won. That's how we separate powers. Here was an example that kind of put it into maybe terms that affect your life. It says the principal has equal power to the parent over a student. You could also say, in terms of who has a role in schools, the principal, the teachers, the parents, the students. We all have a role in the schools, and so we've divided up power over what each of us is in control of. The picture here I thought was just a little interesting. A lot of people had the different branches of government divided up, which you see quite often, but this one was a little different. Used a kind of a web diagram here to show that the power between the three branches, when you add it all up, it comes out to an even government. I thought of this as like 100% power. When you add up all three of their powers, you get the government being everyone's equal. And then here's going to be our pantomime. Rule by law, here's a good definition. It says it means that there is a set of rules that everyone has to follow. The key thing with rule by law is everyone has to follow the laws, including the members of the government. I liked on this one that it said no one is excluded. Everybody has to follow the laws. We've heard a lot this week, we're a government of law, not of men, which means our rulers can't just make up their own laws on the spur of the moment. They have to follow the laws that are in our Constitution. An example here of rule by law says if the president broke a law, he'd have to pay the same consequences. If the president were to, get arrested for something, he could face jail time just like anyone else. It says the same with police. It's not just our leaders that we elect, it's the people that we respect in our community. Police, teachers, doctors, anybody with a job, any adult, any child, we all have to face the same laws and the same consequences. We don't get a free pass, it says here. That's a very good example. Some good pictures here. You can see the king's on a hill. I think that just signifies that the king maybe is an elevated stature. He's a little bit seen as more important than the people down here, but yet he says, I have to follow the laws too. The king does have to follow what the people beneath him have to follow as well. And this one here shows that our leaders have to follow our rules. Here's a king having to pay his taxes just like anybody else. Coming up next year is our pantomime. Okay, with the term due process of law, this can be a hard term sometimes for high school students. The definition here just simplifies it nice and easy. A due process of law is when the state, the government, whether it's national government, state government, whoever, the government protects the rights of an individual in court. It's all of your rights must be given to you while you're in court. An example, if you do a crime, you have to have your chance to say if you did it or not. We're going to have the actual term for this coming up, but this is an example of due process of law. It's a specific term we have coming up soon, but that term is an example of due process of law, so this works out great. And then the picture here, it shows someone walking into a courthouse. There's the judge, there's the jury, there's each lawyer, and you walk into the courthouse, and you're either given your chance to prove you're free, or you're innocent, or you're put in jail because you're guilty. But everyone gets that chance. Here's the pantomime. Okay, here's the term habeas corpus. We had said in class the word corpus is what clues you in here. Corpse, body. So what habeas corpus is the king cannot refuse you your trial. Everyone's body, everyone gets their day in court. You always get your day in court. And the example here explains a little more about that. It says, even if someone is clearly convicted, you're guilty of the crime, everyone knows you're guilty, you still get your day in court to either try to get a shorter sentence or plead your innocence. It doesn't matter how guilty you are. Everyone gets their day in court. Everyone gets their chance to be heard. That's what makes habeas corpus an example of limited government. The government just can't throw you in jail. Our picture shows that. Even if you're obviously guilty, the government just can't throw you in jail and forget about you. You have to get your day in court. Here's somebody that's just been thrown in jail, and someone walking by says, "'Tis wrong." And the kings would use this to throw people in jail who were innocent, and they would never be heard from again. So habeas corpus protects you. It gives you your day in court to plead your innocence. Here is our pantomime. Okay. Next term, trial by jury. Definition here says when someone gets their day in court, a group of their peers will decide their fate. And that's exactly it. Instead of a judge who might be influenced or biased because of the king deciding if you're guilty or innocent, you have a group of community members like yourself decide if you're guilty or innocent. It goes along with habeas corpus because if you get your day in court, you need to have a fair trial once you get there, and a judge may not give you that. So trial by jury has a jury of your peers decide your fate. The example here is you've been accused, and this is from like a classroom, so it's not actually a court, but something that might, be a connection to your life. If you were accused of stealing a pencil in a class, instead of the teacher deciding if you stole the pencil, your classmates would decide if you stole the pencil. They may be more likely to give you a fair trial, whereas the teacher may be upset that you took one of their pencils. And the picture here just shows what a courtroom may look like. Here's the defendant down here in the left-hand corner. You can see a judge there looking big and powerful with their gavel. There's a witness on the witness stand, but the people that actually decide your fate are over here, the jury, people like you. You can see the judge is big with the wig and the robe. The jury looks more like you. They may be more willing to listen to your side of the story. Here's our pantomime. And my actors for the pantomimes went to bed, so I may start using more pictures and videos and putting together little scenes, but just letting you know.
Matches for $20,000 each. Lowest score wins the whole regulation match play. I have a number of tees in my hand. Your Honor, odd or even? Odd. Odd it is? Your Honor, Your Honor.
Hey, Tiger, keep it fair. Keep it fair.
No, I can't.
Okay, I'm running out of time here, so this may become no pantomimes, but a social contract, the definition here we've got is an agreement to a government that the people make where they give up power for rights. That's true. In a social contract, the people give up their power for the government to protect their rights. And the second definition we had here that I thought was pretty good is they also expect safety and security back from that government. So a social contract's an agreement where the people get something and the government gets something. The example here is the Mayflower Compact. That is the first social contract written in the New World. We talked about the people on the Mayflower, the Pilgrims, didn't want to step off into a state of nature. And a picture of a social contract is the diagram that we had in class. Very good. Okay, looking at these, it looks like everybody did pretty good on natural rights. They're rights you're born with. They're rights given to you by God. They're life, liberty, and property. They cannot be taken from you. If they are, you can rebel. Two examples here of natural rights. Your freedom of speech is an example of your natural rights, as is your right to question the government. Those were both examples of liberty, and here's a picture of your life, your liberty, and your property being protected.